My name is G.C. Murray, and I'm here on the campus of Florida State University College of Law with Professor Larry Krieger. Professor Krieger is a clinical professor and co-director of clinical externship programs here at Florida State. His teaching focuses on litigation skills and the sources of lawyer professionalism. Most recently, he published an article, What Makes Lawyers Happy? A Data-Driven Prescription to Redefine Professional Success. Professor, thank you again for doing this with us.
Sure, appreciate being here.
So what do you hear are the common struggles of young lawyers today?
Well, I think we probably all hear about the same thing. You know, everybody wants to get ahead. People are worried about money. They're worried about jobs if they don't have one. They're worried about their debt. And of course, they're worried about getting ahead in the firm if they're in a law firm. So I think, one of the things you mentioned here also is how has that changed in the past several years? To my mind, it's always been the same as long as I've been in this business, probably 30 years or more. That's stayed pretty consistent, even though the economy has been down, but there were other times it's been up and down, and the concerns that people have, really the fears and anxieties that they have seem to be pretty consistent over time.
And what general advice do you have for battling those kind of fears and concerns?
Well, I think people have to look at, is it helping me? You know, I always tell people, go ahead and write down a list of all the things that you've worried a lot about, and then circle the ones that worrying has made them better. Usually there's nothing you can circle. Worrying is a waste of time. So I think it's really more being, we're supposed to be an intelligent profession. Look at, is the way I'm using my attention and my thinking to worry about this and that and so forth, is it helping? And be smart enough to realize it's not helping, so let me focus on what does help. Things like what can make my work product better. Certainly focusing on that instead of worrying. What can make my personal life better? What can make my health better? So that's really an important thing that we don't teach in law school, is managing your attention. So you focus on what helps you.
Now, your recent article, What Makes Lawyers Happy, was the most shared article on the New York Times 2 days in a row. So what does make lawyers happy?
Yeah, that was exciting. That study was about 6 or 7 years in the making, working with bar associations in several states, and it had a big following. So I was happy to see that. And I think the reason is that the readership of the New York Times is a highly professional, typically highly educated readership, not unlike the legal population. And what the study showed that makes lawyers happy is pretty much all the things we don't focus on in law school and in the legal profession per se. I mean, the study really had two big parts. The first part was to contrast the kinds of things that people are usually competing for that presumably we think are going to make us happy: good money, prestigious job, high grades, law review in law school, all the things that will get us good money and a prestigious job. And so these kind of external factors that make us look good. And then contrasting those with internal things like how much integrity we have, how closely related we feel to other people, how closely related we feel to our work, to our supervisor, a lot of relationship issues with ourselves and other people in our work. Because I really was thinking for many, many years that the things we focus on and that everybody's getting, the first question, the things everybody's stressing over and worrying about, even the people who are successful at those things are not particularly making themselves happy. And so the study focused in the first part about contrasting those external factors, money, prestige, status, symbols, and so forth, against these internal factors, a person's personal needs, their motivation for their work, their values. And the reason that I think it was such a a popular study both in the press and also among academics, is that we really showed what we expected to show, that money and status and prestige and power, those kind of things really are not making lawyers happy, even the ones who are successful. And the other things that tend to be overlooked are making lawyers happy, those that put attention on them.
And not to ask you an overly existential question, but you know, have you found that there's a difference between being happy, being content, being fulfilled in young lawyers?
Oh, really good question. You know, there's a million different definitions of happiness, and actually we talk about that in the article. Interestingly, contentment is one of the strongest measures that we have in the study, the level to which a person feels content and satisfied with their life, is one of the big measures in the study as to who's actually happy. So our measure in the study of happiness includes about 25 different factors, 20 emotions, contentment is one of them, and then several life satisfaction factors. But I think as far as lawyers, and this again goes to the main finding, all the things you mentioned, happiness, contentment, fulfillment, satisfaction, they all go together. I mean, a person that has one of those tends to have them all, tends to. And they don't tend to go with money and power. All right? That's the important thing. So pretty much however you define happiness, and there are many scientific definitions of happiness that we explain in the study as well. No matter how you define it scientifically, the money and power and prestige factors don't produce it. Unfortunate, but you know, I always like to tell my students in class, reality always wins. You know, and so the idea of the study was to try to show what the reality is, because so many lawyers, we're a bright profession, you know, we're a powerful profession, but I think it's pretty well accepted we're not a particularly happy profession overall. Many lawyers are extremely happy, but overall we're no happier than any other group and less happy than a lot of groups. And so the question becomes, what's the reality that we're missing? What's the reality that we're missing? And I think the study shows the reality that we're missing is what we're focusing on doesn't make us happy.
Now, if you go around voluntary bar associations, you know, there's always a colloquialism about the happy place. Does a happy place exist, and how does one discover his or her own happy place?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, it can sound kind of frivolous and flip, my happy place, and it can be. I think this, you know, our scientific definition of happiness we call subjective well-being. Subjective meaning it's personal to each one of us, in a sense of well-being. So it includes a sense of being satisfied with life and having positive moods. It doesn't mean being happy all the time. Nobody's happy all the time. You know, our moods go up and down, that's normal. So I think it really takes some study in our culture to figure out what's going to make people happy. This study is a good example here. And what I mean is some personal, subjective study, reading, thinking, reflecting. People can even look at their religions, their traditional religion, however they were brought up. The religions pretty much all have it right, you know. You can take all your riches, you're not going to get into heaven. You're going to have to go through the eye of a needle, basically, if you're trying to cram all your riches in there with you. It's not going to get you there. Heaven being the happy place, we could say.
Okay.
So I think the study shows that. But people have to be willing to be open-minded and look, because it's not obvious.
Now, you've been in the profession for quite some time. Now, have you noticed that there's been a shift in the values of lawyers since you started?
Honestly, I would say no. Most people say yes. I've been watching this for a long time. I mean, I started out litigating around 1980. I've always been a government lawyer when I was litigating, but I was up against some of the best firms in the country. I had very big, complex racketeering cases all around the country and so forth as part of my work. And I've always seen the same problems in lawyers, and it is a values problem. So I think it ebbs and flows, but by and large, our values are too much focused on that external stuff. Who's at the top of their class, who's at the top of the profession in terms of fame, income, and all that, and those things just don't work.
So millennial lawyers aren't too much different than Generation
Well, I think they're
X
different.
lawyers?
I think psychologically they're different, but what makes them happy and what their values are isn't that different. I think the way they relate to the world, there is a generational thing. Certainly you all that grew up with these things. You know, I was working in this job for 3 years before I learned how to turn my first computer on. It was in my office and I had never had one, so I didn't use it. So there's huge differences in how much interpersonal time people are used to versus how much screen time and like that. But as far as values, really what is important in life, the most important things in life, I think they haven't changed much, and I think they do need to change if we're going to have a happier profession.
Now, I read your article, and one of the strongest factors dealt with autonomy. And as you know, I'm the Deputy General Counsel at the Florida Justice Association. I've had the great opportunity to work under Paul Jess and Deborah Henley, and I've been given great autonomy, and it does truly make my job a lot better, just judging over the 4 years that I've been there. What would you say is the best way to gain autonomy as a young lawyer in a firm or in a government profession?
Right, it's a huge question, and I'm going to tie in not just autonomy, but autonomy support, because which is the level to which a person's work supervisor supports their autonomy. That was another factor that was extremely important in the study for who's happy. I'm glad you're one of those people that has that autonomy, because your supervisors are supportive of it. They let you do your work. You know, honestly, this is a hard one, but the best way to have autonomy and autonomy support, the best way to have it the fastest is choose carefully what job you take. Once you're in it, your autonomy is pretty much limited by the attitude of your supervisor and the management hierarchy above you. If they give you autonomy, you're going to have it. If they don't, you won't. And there's not a lot you can tell the managing partner or the general counsel. If you know, and I want to point out here too, so that you know, people viewing can be clear about this. The opposite of autonomy, the thing that cuts down a person's well-being, because it is the most important factor in the study, huge effect on well-being. The opposite of autonomy is feeling controlled. Mm-hmm. You have a controlling boss, one who micromanages you. People who feel controlled just are not happy, whether it's a child, whether it's a student, whether it's an employee. And so you're not going to have much effect on changing your boss's management style. If your boss is a control freak, your boss is going to be a control freak. And those kind of people tend to thrive on the power differential and on authority, so it's doubly hard to tell them to change their style, right? So I think people have to have the courage to choose their work carefully. Don't just go for an interview, but you interview. And don't trust what the hiring people who were sent to try to hire you tell you. You know, I have a booklet actually for law students called Deeper Understanding of Your Career Choices, which is based on all this research. And it advises law students and young lawyers, go for the interview and the places you feel good about. Contact the young lawyers there and even contact the secretaries and ask them, what's the environment like? How long do people stay? And look at the retention rate. Where the retention rate is low, it means that control is high. Pretty much guaranteed. Even places with the highest pay, I mean, the famous example is the big firms. The turnover rate is enormous. These are the highest paid new graduates, but the turnover rate is astounding in large firms because as the firm gets larger, autonomy tends to go down, tends to. So you got to look carefully at what you're getting yourself into. And of course, practically speaking, you have to get a job. So you take a job and you find you don't have the autonomy you hoped for. You're not happy, fine. You're paying the bills, be looking quietly for another job. That gives you more autonomy.
Now, you talk about autonomy and autonomy support, and I liken that to mentorship, which is huge to me.
Mm-hmm.
How big have you found that mentorship is in a young lawyer finding peace or finding happiness in his or her career?
Well, I'm not an expert on that as far as I don't have more experience with mentorship than others do, other than I would say as a teacher, I tend to mentor a lot of students. They'll come in and I'll really listen to their personal concerns, their career concerns, and, try to guide them, not just teach what I'm paid to teach. And we're all extremely responsive to that. I mean, even when you mentor a brand new graduate, how satisfying it is for them and also for you. So, a big part of this is the relationships that we form, and part of this is the value of helping others. So the mentor who's really well-intentioned is engaging in one of these intrinsic values, which is helping others and building community, in this case, the professional lawyer community. And then for the mentee, it's just the flip side. They're receiving a sense of respect from the more senior person and guidance. They're getting information that's helpful to them. So a lot of it has to do with the mentor. It's interesting that you brought it up. Just like a supervisor at work, a mentor needs to have that autonomy, supportive approach. Not just telling, well, do this, do this, do this, do this. Be at top 10% in law review and you'll be fine. That's a kind of a controlling approach. It doesn't really tell a student something they didn't know, and it doesn't build up their own sense of autonomy, which involves, in other words, look for a boss or look for a mentor that wants to know about you and expresses interest in you. What are your interests? What are your preferences? What do you care about? What are your values? And then they mentor or supervise your work based on what your strengths and preferences are. That's where the support comes in.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I've had a situation where I guess a supposed mentor had that this is what you need to do approach, and it really had a deleterious effect on me growing up as a young lawyer, and ultimately I shifted away and pivoted more towards the mentors of mine who were very supportive and this is a guiding principle of what you should do, not necessarily you need to do A, B, and C. So.
Exactly. Yes, and I think again it's the care that the person in the more powerful position, whether it's the boss or the mentor or a parent or a teacher, but nearly everybody's going to have children, not everyone. Same exact thing. You want to bring up a healthy child who's going to have confidence and be motivated and be creative and find their own path in the best way they can. Same thing, autonomy support. You show interest in them and ask them, what do you want? What do you care about? And then mentor or parent them. Or for your secretary, same thing. You're going to be the autonomy supportive boss for your secretary if you want to get the most work and the most retention out of him or her. Same thing. You've got to know and care about what makes them tick, what their preferences are, and give them as many choices as you can consistent with their own preferences. And then when you can't give choices, this is a little quickie on how to be a good manager or a good parent or a good mentor. When you can't give choices, when you say you got to do it this way, at least you explain why. Okay. I'm controlling, I'm telling you you've got to, all right? But here's why. So you're showing them respect. I'd like to let you do it that way. It's a nice idea with adolescents. It only works so far, but it helps.
I've been lucky. I have a great mom who's a teacher. So she's always delicate when she teaches me my lessons. And my dad's in the profession. He's a magistrate in the 11th Circuit. Great. But how does a young lawyer find a good mentor?
Boy, I think that varies by location. I know the state of Georgia has a required mentoring program. And when I was active in the Florida bar, doing committee work and such, we had the director of the Georgian mentoring program come in and talk to us. So it depends on where you are. Obviously in Florida we don't have that requirement. It's going to depend a lot on the locale, the local bar association. Or, you know, it's a lot like getting a job that you are going to be happy about, finding a good boss. You've got to network, you've got to go to the local bar meetings, to your interest group meetings, participate, get to know people, and then choose carefully. You know, a good mentor doesn't mean the person who's making the most money or even the president of the local bar association. They may be very controlling and stuck in their own ego rather than being interested in what you want. So I think it's very individual. People need to just be aware. Picking somebody who's great may not be that helpful. They need someone who's going to support their own autonomy, finding themselves.
And, you know, dealing with autonomy and autonomy support, a lot of that gives you the ability, or as the young lawyer, to communicate effectively with your, you know, higher-ups or your chain of command. If you're not in that situation, or even if you are, how do you communicate specifically when you feel overloaded or overworked?
Yeah, see, this is where we get into sort of work-life balance and mental health and physical health. Overwork's a big problem for lawyers. You know, we seem to think that if we're not working at least 50 hours a week, we're not working, you know. And then we have the billable hour system, which has gone a little crazy in a lot of law firms, not all. So it's almost starting with law school, where soon we just have to work all the time, and then we'll get ahead, and we just keep working all the time, and then we get ahead. The study was very clear that the people who really are getting ahead that way are not particularly happy. You know, it's not getting the job done, getting ahead in the normal sense of making money and making partner and so forth. So I think, again, people need to do their own kind of self-study. I think reading this study or similar studies is helpful because, look, we have to decide, do you want to be happy? You know, I mean, nobody asks you that in law school. Do you want to be happy? But who doesn't want to be happy? People probably went to law school because they want to be happy. And they think that law school is going to help them be happy. But, you know, when work is getting out of hand and you've got too much and you can't do it, I think this is, again, going back to my favorite old saw, reality always wins. If you ignore that reality, you're going to lose. What's the reality? Is I have too much work and I'm going under. All right? Let's say that's the reality. I'm not getting my personal time, I'm not getting my family or friend time, I'm not getting my sports or workout time, I'm not getting my church or synagogue time, I'm not getting my sleep time, I'm not getting my meal time. You're not going to survive well. It just can't be done. And so, again, because these are established values in the profession, work hard and get ahead, people have to work hard, but they have to also be willing to play and care for themselves in balance. People have to be honest. A, with themselves. This is not working for me. And then B, sure, talk to the boss about it. And if the boss is unrelenting and say, hey, that's the way it is, you know, if you want to move up to senior attorney or you want to make partner or whatever it is, this is what you need to do, then you accept that. Keep doing it as long as you need to pay the rent, but be looking for another job because it is not going to work for you.
And you mentioned work-life balance, and I think it's a phrase that the audience is familiar with, but can you kind of go into a more clinical definition of what a work-life balance is and exactly how does one achieve a proper work-life balance?
You know, I think it's an offshoot of this study, really. In the study, we came up with a mathematical sort of description of all the different pieces of work and life that are going to produce well-being for a person, right? And I think it's not a quick answer. People know when they don't have it if they're willing to look. I'm out of balance. I'm out of balance. I'm working too much. I'm worrying too much. Whatever it is. I'm drinking too much. You know, I'm gambling too much, whatever it is, I'm out of balance. People know it if they're willing to look. And again, I think this just requires people to have courage to look at reality. It's something that we're not good at. We think we're up in our lawyer brain and I'm smart, and so I can keep thinking and being smarter than most of the other people, maybe even most of the other lawyers, that I'll have it made, and it doesn't work like that. So, I think realizing that these internal factors, having autonomy, which means part of autonomy is being authentically who you are, and being motivated for doing your work as an expression of who you are. So, work-life balance, to me, is a deeper question. It's just not just how many hours do I spend jogging versus meditating versus sleeping versus working versus being with my family and friends, etc. It's more of, am I keeping a good balance between myself, my relationships with others, my relationship to my work that's healthy, my relationship to my boss, things we've already talked about, or are these things, or am I more focused on these externals? How much am I making? Am I getting ahead? Am I on the partner track or on the promotion track? What's my one-loss record if I'm litigating? All these things really will throw life out of balance because they're not healthy. They're not healthy. They'll come along if a person is working. If a person has these basic needs and motivations handled, they're autonomous, they have integrity, which that means. They're connecting well with other people. They feel competent at their work. They feel motivated to do their work because they think their work is important and they enjoy it. People are going to get great results. Those are the people that are going to move ahead the fastest and get the fastest promotions. But working for the promotion is counterproductive. Working for the good purpose in the work and working at a place where I feel good about the people, we have a shared goal that matters to me. Those are the things that will make the person happy, and the money and the promotions will come along, but you don't need them nearly as much because you're already happy. That's what the study shows.
Very interesting. Now, you talk about figuring out when you're out of balance, and everyone kind of, when you're not in sync with yourself. What are the keys to sustaining that work-life balance once you've re-achieved it or achieved it?
Yeah, great question. And you may not achieve it. How do I achieve it once I realize? So the first thing is be honest. Am I living a good, balanced life that is healthy for me? And that means physically healthy, emotionally healthy, socially healthy, spiritually healthy, however you define that. Most of the time, if we're honest, the answer is going to be no to one of those questions. I mean, we're always adjusting. We're a self-adjusting organism, just like, the autopilot in a plane. These jets, I'm told that the jet is almost never on course. That the autopilot is constantly adjusting, but the autopilot only lets the aircraft get off course a little bit before it picks it up, and then it adjusts it back, then it goes too far. So just like that, we need to be constantly adjusting. I think, I've already said, and it's critical, take a hard look at it, maybe once a month. Have a 10-minute date with yourself once a month. Am I in balance physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually, however I define it? And the answer to one or more of those is almost certainly going to be no, and you can make a little adjustment. But I think the other big thing, and we were talking about it actually before we started shooting, is have a group of supportive friends and colleagues. This is great that YLD is doing this. Have a group of young lawyers, young and older lawyers, a group at church, any kind of a service group, Kiwanis Club, whatever it is, Inns of Court, where you actually have trusted friends where you can talk about your issues. Because it's way easier to talk and be heard than it is to figure it out in our head. It's a huge weak point, I think, of lawyers and our training to be inside our head, analytical, think like a lawyer, and be self-sufficient, never show a weakness, you know. That's a tremendous weakness, to never show a weakness. Tremendous. Because we can't get support. Can't get support for our weaknesses then. You know, if I could have figured it out, I wouldn't have the weakness. The fact I have it means I can't figure it out. I may not even be able to see that I have it. I may be in denial, all right? And so having a group where you can be, really be your authentic self. Here's where things are great, here's where I'm struggling, and sit around, have some coffee, have a meal together, have a meeting once a month or once a week, some kind of, we could say, support group. You know, people in 12-step groups have that structurally, but most people aren't in 12-step groups. They can have it socially, and the goal being we're going to support each other. That's the best way I know.
I like that concept.
That's
A
the best way
10-minute
I know.
date, once a month, 10-minute date.
Yeah, for a self-evaluation, and then have people that you can share that with, whether it's family, friends, colleagues.
Now, you are famous for being quoted as saying, thinking like a lawyer is a legal skill, not a life skill. What is that?
Yeah, thinking like a lawyer. You know, and there's a big study that came out about thinking like a lawyer that very much supports our study, and it was actually sponsored by the American Bar Foundation, which kind of showed all these same things. But thinking like a lawyer is not a life skill. We can tend to think it is because we get to law school all starry-eyed. We're going to learn this magic prescription for being smarter, and all our professors are so smart, and they're great analysts and they're experts in their field and so forth. And we can kind of put them on a pedestal, and we kind of have to try to emulate them because we're suddenly in the competition for grades right from day one at most schools. And that's all going to depend on how well you can think like a lawyer. It's a new skill. Purely analytical, facts, law, and integrating the facts with the law to come up with a position that you can then articulate, speak, or write out. The problem with that is it's not going to make a person happy. It's going to make them a good legal technician, but it has nothing to do with any of these factors that make a person happy, other than you'll be able to get a job. You'll be able to feel confident in your job, which is a very important thing, no question. And you'll earn some money, which is a modestly important thing. But all the other 15 or 16 important factors for a person being happy and now happy also means in our studies satisfied with their life. There's two sets of components here that go into that. Has nothing to do with thinking like a lawyer. We have to remember that it's a limited skill. And a lot of times students and young lawyers get kind of obsessed with it because it's pretty much all you focus on in the first year of law school. Maybe even, it's all that's being tested on most exams, which determine your GPA and your class rank, which is all that seems to matter in law school, and it turns out none of this really matters that much. So it's more important to know when to put down thinking like a lawyer, which is most of the time, except when you're analyzing a legal problem, and think like a person. Think like a person. Care about other people. Know what your values are. Tell the truth. Be authentic.
Now, that blends right into the next question, which is everyone is different. Everyone is going through a different course in their life. But what would you recommend to be the higher priorities for the work-life balance? What are the things that people really ought to be checking off on their list?
Yeah, I've already touched on that. I think it brings up the Oracle of Delphi, or one of those Greek things, know thyself. Know thyself. Where people get off the track really quickly is they forget about their self. They forget about, and they may not even be forgetting about it because they never really thought about it. Our culture is not one that encourages you to think about what are your values. What do you think is really important in life? Why do you think you're here? How did you get here, and what's your purpose here? if you have a purpose. If you don't, you better find one. And it better involve helping someone if you're going to be happy. So I think know thyself comes first, because until then, you have no way of knowing what kind of job you should be looking for. It's part of that booklet I wrote. You're just looking for the job that everybody else is looking for, the one that pays the most and that everybody else wants. Well, as you said, everybody's different. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And it turns out in our study, the jobs that everybody wants are not the jobs that make people happy. I don't know if you recall this part of the study, but in part 2 of the study, we went into a lot of specific details of law practice and life as a lawyer to see what is making people happy, or at least correlating with happiness. People who are doing this are happier. And one of the things we did is we broke down these many thousands of lawyers that we studied into 4 groups: a judge and hearing officer group, and then a service group, which is the public service and government and legal service lawyers, which tends to be a lower paid group, but more highly intrinsically, altruistically valuing, helping group. And then the prestige group, the people with the higher paid jobs in the larger firms and so forth. And then the other lawyers, kind of your regular, garden variety lawyers, small firm, family lawyers, private criminal defense lawyers, and general practice and so forth. And what we found was that the lawyers who were getting the big jobs with way higher pay, they had way higher grades in law school, the prestige lawyers, were not as happy as a group. Of course, there are huge variations individually, but as a group, they were not as happy as the service lawyers, the public defenders, the legal services people, the prosecutors, the government lawyers, the nonprofit lawyers, and so forth. That group tended to have much, much lower pay and less prestige, but they're happier than the people getting the jobs everybody supposedly wants in law school, that they're all worried if they're not on law review, they're not in the top 10%, can't get those jobs. Turns out getting those jobs wasn't helping people very much.
Yeah.
So, know thyself.
You talk about in your article basically how a healthy body helps a healthy mind. You want to kind of go into that, and how big does a healthy mind or a healthy body really play a role in having a healthy mind?
Yeah, I think everybody has that experience, right? You have good days and you have bad days. You have a day that you slept well, you rested, you haven't been worrying and anxious a lot. You wake up, you're fresh, you feel good. It's all physical. There's nothing mental about that. You just wake up and you slept on the right side of the bed, so to speak, and you're not hungover. You ate well the day before, maybe you exercised. You were in balance the day before and through the night, and so you wake up and you're going to have a good day. You're going to be more effective at work. People are going to like you more. You're going to like people more. There's going to be more parking spots when you need them. Everything seems to go right on those days. It's all based on your physical condition. The converse is a day when you haven't slept well, or maybe you've had too much to drink, or you were just super stressed and worried yesterday, whatever it is, you overworked at work, you were out of balance, and you wake up, you're dull, you're foggy. That's not mental, that's physical. It's based on your physical condition. Your brain is a physical organ. It's not functioning well. And the whole day goes like that. It's just not a good day. So, the people who are happy in the study are the ones having the good days more often than not. So I think it's a daily experience we have.
What is shifting and pivoting to kind of a new subject, what advice would you have for a young lawyer who's in a practice area that's kind of diametrically opposed to that young lawyer's personality? Say a transactional lawyer that's extremely outgoing, but transactional work doesn't really bode well for that. Or you have a trial lawyer who's extremely shy.
Right.
So what kind of general advice do you have for those kind of individuals?
I think that's a good question. It almost goes back to the same thing: autonomy, authenticity, know thyself. First, you have to realize, sitting at my screen, drafting up patent stuff or doing closing statements for malls or houses or whatever it is, isn't giving me the interpersonal connections that I thrive on as an extrovert, let's say. So you have to realize that. And then you either find ways to favor things more in the job itself, be on the phone more, you know, rather than handling everything by email and so forth. Take breaks, walk down the hall, talk to colleagues. Ultimately, you have to know yourself and express yourself in your work, because we spend so much time at work, even if we're in the healthiest, you know, I say 40 to 50, 55 hours max range of work time. The shy person who is a litigator, I actually have a lot of those people in my class, and I teach litigation skills. I think that when you're in a situation where you're having to interact with others, and a jury trial is the penultimate difficult situation there because the people don't want to be there, and you got to be all kind of friendly with them and not look too smart, or you put them off, but you've got to get them, you know, through the law and the facts and to what you want. I think this autonomy and authenticity thing comes through again. It's what I teach. I've seen this over and over again, and I see it in journals when my students go out and litigate. Then they write me a journal every day. Be yourself. You've got to be yourself. You know, a shy person needs to not hide their shyness. As a matter of fact, I tell them I'd be up front with a jury. You know, be authentic, and then show people your authentic side. You know, I'm quieter, a little more reserved than most lawyers, and so, but it doesn't mean that this case isn't important. It's critical to my client, and this is just how I'm going to come across. Don't, you know? And people will appreciate that. They want to know who you really are, and they know not everybody's, you know, L.A. Law or Ally McBeal or whatever the new shows are, the big, you know, dramatic extrovert that we see on TV and the movies. So I think that's not a problem as long as people will embrace who they are.
Okay. Now, is there a stigma around taking vacation? You talk about working 40 to 55 hours max. And I know that every job comes with vacation packages, but is there still a stigma around taking vacation?
You know, GC, it's a great question. Here again, you've got to choose your workplace wisely. You got to find out. You got to find out, because those interviewers are going to say, "Oh, we got maternity leave. We want you to take maternity leave. We want you to take your annual leave. We don't want to see you. You know, when you're clerking there, it's 5:30. Why are you still here? You know." Whereas once you're hired full time, if you're leaving at 5:30, you're off the track immediately. You know, and so I think it's very important when people are looking for jobs, ab initio, right at the outset, ask the lawyers, the young lawyers in the firm and the secretaries, how much vacation do people take, have the new lawyers take? You'll find out. Because that package may say, oh yeah, 2 weeks, the first 2 years, and then it's going up to 3, and we want you to take it. But if nobody's taking it, it means they don't really want you to take it. You know, you still got to come up with the billable hours if it's a firm. You know, and in agencies, same thing. There may be pressure to be there. So you have to do your research and find out. In the study, as far as personal choices goes, yeah, things about being married, having children, exercising, and so forth, those kind of personal choice variables that we studied, taking vacations was the most powerful predictor of a happy lawyer. Okay? Now, there's reasons for that. One, it's good to take vacations. Two, the people who are taking the vacations are probably in the workplaces that are more autonomy supportive, and the boss wants them to take vacations because they know they're going to be more effective. All right? And so the people have more autonomy, they have more security there, and so they're willing. The converse side of this is in our study, and this is a pretty perverse finding, this is pretty bad. I actually looked at the relationship between the number of hours a position was permitted, or the number of days, vacation days per year that it was permitted for a lawyer to take, and how many they actually took. And it turns out it's an inverse correlation, meaning the more days, on average, among these 6,200 lawyers, the more days that the lawyer's position allowed them to take in vacation, the fewer days they actually took.
Wow.
All right? Which means something's wrong here. And probably a lot of these jobs where they say, we want you to take all this time as a promise, all these great perks, the pressure at work is such that if you take the time, you're going to be penalized. And so they don't take it. So let the buyer beware. Do your research. Do your research.
Okay. And I'm guessing vacation days and all that, the same thing goes for when you're allowed to leave the office. I know several young lawyers, they finish up, they're more efficient than perhaps other lawyers that are working there, but they feel like they can't leave when the clock runs out, just simply because it'll look taboo.
Let the buyer beware. I mean, you have to know the agency or the firm milieu. And, if they're not supporting you to have a good life, they want you to give your life to your job, it's not a place you're going to be happy long term. It just can't be done.
Now, a couple buddies of mine and I started a not-for-profit a couple years back, and that's how we do our community service, and it really has been rewarding for us.
Wonderful.
How do you feel that being active in community service organizations or religious organizations or even voluntary bar associations kind of ease that stress level for young lawyers?
Yes, very practical. And again, you can take it right out of the study. When you're helping other people, you're expressing an intrinsic value and something inside. It's not about how famous you are, how much money you make, or anything else. You're doing it to help others. You're also increasing your relatedness with others. You're making a choice to be involved with other people in a positive way. Same thing with the voluntary bar, the local bar association, a service club, and so forth. And so you're immediately enhancing the level of satisfaction of many of these needs, these internal needs and values that people share who are happy. And so that has to help. And again, it's kind of what I said before about if it's in your religion and your religion has been around for a few thousand years, it's probably true. Help thy neighbor, it's true. Love thy neighbor, it's true. I mean, these things don't last for 1,000 years, but the study really shows it in numbers.
Let's again pivot and talk a little bit more about mental health. So what are the mental health issues that young lawyers specifically should look out for?
I think everything I've talked about, there's more pressure on the young lawyer. More pressure, you're less established in your career. You may be looking for your first job or trying to get ahead in your first job. You don't have the reputation. You don't have the track record. You don't have the choices that people increase as they go through their career. And so it's easier to forget what matters. You don't have as much autonomy on average as a new lawyer. It's just, on average. And so it's easy to forget yourself and get lost in what they want and what the external expectations are, not just to the boss, but maybe parents, it may be spouse. We don't want to have kids, but we need more money first. And so, there can be a lot of pressures on young lawyers that makes it even more important for them to do their self-study work and really take that inventory. Where am I? How close am I to a physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual balance in my life this month? And where can I make even the smallest adjustment to improve something? The pressure is more, and the study shows that in general, which a lot of other studies of general populations have shown, strangely enough, because we glorify youth so much, but older people are happier. It's just as simple as that. And it was true in our lawyer group that as the lawyers age, they on average become happier. And the effect size is the same as making more money, actually. It's modest, but it matters.
And, you know, if you do suffer from any kind of mental health issue, how does one appropriately communicate that to one's superiors?
Yeah, I don't know that you immediately want to communicate it to a superior. I think, number one, pat yourself on the back if you're willing to look at it and say, I'm out of balance, I'm getting depressed, which is very common for people who work too much and they're stressed or worried. Depression can follow stress pretty quickly. Anxiety, a lot of these things are common in lawyers. Kudos to the person who recognizes it and says, I need to get some help. Now the question is, where do you go? Mm-hmm. I don't think I go to myself, I don't think I go to my supervisor first. It's a high-risk move. Now if the supervisor already knows, then yeah, let's talk to the supervisor. I think I'm going to go to a psychologist first. I'm going to talk to colleagues that I trust first. If it's really persistent and I feel pretty lost, I think I would call Florida Lawyers Assistance. They're there for every member of the bar in a confidential way, whether it's a drug problem, an alcohol problem, or a mental health problem. They have a full-time counselor, psychologist on their staff who lawyers around the state can talk to by phone, who only works with Florida lawyers. Okay? And I believe that those services are all confidential, but they will tell people. So the FLA hotline is very important.
Now, towards the end of your article, you kind of discuss alcohol consumption and how that affects the happiness of lawyers. What role does it play in the perceived role of the lawyer?
Yeah, good. So, alcohol can play a lot of different roles for us. One, it can be a socializing thing. And, people get together around a beer or a glass of wine, maybe watch some sports or, have a quilting group, whatever it is, have a book club, or just have a meal and have a drink or two. And that actually can have a good effect on people. Not because of the alcohol, but because of the sociability of it. It's this relatedness, relating to others' need, which is the number 2 most important predictor of if a person's going to be happy. So how often a person drinks doesn't matter, statistically at least, in terms of how happy they are. As a matter of fact, as drinking frequency goes up to a certain extent, happiness just marginally increases, and it's because of that socializing factor on average. Now, if a person is drinking alone a lot, they're the outlier. It's not going to work. But what does affect happiness is how much a person drinks each time. So we measured quantity and frequency. And I've already talked about frequency being pretty much a non-factor. But quantity is a huge factor. And as quantity goes up, frequency also goes up. So as a person is having 3 drinks each time they drink, 4 drinks each time they drink, their frequency tends to go up, and that combination is very toxic to well-being. So I think one of the red flags, anytime a person is having more than a drink on a regular basis when they do drink, there's a red flag there. If 2, then it's really getting borderline, but beyond that, the quantity is a big predictor of well-being. Okay. And I think it's for the same reasons we've talked about before, that alcohol effect helps to numb the person or cover up their fact that they're out of balance. So they're going to continue not to deal with it in an honest way. Well, I'm, too much work, or not enough home life, or not enough self-care, not enough spiritual connection with something that I can trust. Whatever it is, you got to be clean and sober to have a good look at yourself. It's plain as that.
Now, for the individuals who are clean and sober, I know there are many in the profession who simply do not drink at all, but there's almost always alcohol present at lawyer functions.
Right.
How do those people get along in those situations? Is there still a stigma about a lawyer who doesn't drink?
You know, once again, let the buyer beware. Choose your friends wisely. You know, choose your firm wisely, choose your agency wisely. Some have lots of drinking parties and they expect you to be part of the club. Some have lots of drinking parties, but they don't judge you if you're not. So I think, again, it's a matter of a person having integrity. Don't do it because they think you should. If you don't want to drink, don't drink. But you don't have to make a big deal about it. You can go get tomato juice over ice and nobody knows that it's not a Bloody Mary, for example. You know. So I think be true to yourself and pick your friends wisely once again.
Well, that's all the questions I have, Professor Krieger. Do you have any lasting words for our audience?
Well, you know, we're always having fun around here. We're always learning something, and I think it's great that these studies have come out. Let me just mention also, right here at the end, since we were talking about substances, you know, the Hazelden Foundation just came out with a huge study on lawyers. They mostly focused on depression and alcohol use. And it did again show similar problems to what we've been talking about, but it did flag the younger lawyers as the ones most at risk. So I really want to commend you all, you, Ben, and the others involved in getting this information out to people, and really encourage people to support each other in this. Y'all are wonderful people. We deserve to have good lives. We don't just deserve to be good lawyers, we deserve to have good lives. And you know, once we realize we deserve it and we're going to help each other do that, more of this will happen. So I appreciate it.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Professor.
Yes, sir.
And on behalf of the Florida Bar Young Lawyer Division, our President, Gordon Glover, our Health and Wellness Committee and Quality of Life Committee Chair, Ben Gibson, my name is G.C. Murray. Thank you all for watching.